At the Centennial Auditorium in the heart of Liberty City, beneath the dazzling stage lights, Alexis Bennett, a renowned college student famous for her bold liberal views, confidently strode up to the podium. She believed that her sharp words and passionate ideas would crush every dissenting voice. Yet, in the dark recesses of the audience, Barron, who had been quietly observing all day, was preparing to deliver an unforeseen shock. This prestigious debate conference had gathered brilliant young minds from esteemed universities across the nation. Throughout the day, lively exchanges had ignited an atmosphere of intellectual fire, but no one could have predicted that during the open debate session, where every student had the chance to take the stage, fate was about to upend the order. Amid the energy-charged auditorium, Alexis Bennett, with her fiercely determined debating style, advanced to the podium. Her platinum hair lightly fluttered in the breeze from the air conditioning system, complementing her resolute gaze and a confident smile like that of a warrior. Steadying the microphone in her hand, she was ready to make the entire room tremble. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began in a resonant voice, "today we are not here merely to discuss progress, but to confront a burden that obstructs the future of our nation." She paused, her eyes sweeping over every face in the room, then continued in a deep yet resolute tone. "We are being strangled by the control of an outdated generation, those who cling to archaic values, unyielding faith, and rigid family structures that seem to have no place in the modern world." Thunderous applause erupted everywhere, spurring her arguments onward. In the third row, in a shadowy corner, a tall, sharply dressed young man sat silently. None other than Barron, his eyes discreetly following every moment as if waiting for the perfect time to respond. "What a paradox," Alexis sneered sarcastically, her voice laced with derision. "These people, those boomers we dismiss as relics of the past, can't even handle modern technology, yet they arrogate the right to decide our future. They've had their time, and now it's time for us to rewrite the rules." The applause grew ever more raucous, blending with the feverish atmosphere of the auditorium. Alexis's eyes shone brilliantly as she delivered the final blow of her argument. "We must impose an age limit on political participation. Why should someone who cannot witness the consequences of their actions be granted the power to determine the fate of our nation?" The audience erupted in cheers, with students rising to fervently support her. "These individuals," she continued mockingly, "with their blind passion for God and guns, with their yearning to make America great again, are nothing more than ghosts of the past. Their America is dead, and it is high time we bury it." The applause roared like thunder, and Alexis, brimming with energy, pressed on with every word of her declaration. "Family values? Traditional values?" she scoffed. "They are merely empty slogans used to mask resistance to change. They amassed their wealth on the basis of privilege and oppression, and now they dare to sermonize morality to us?" Meanwhile, Barron remained silent, his expression icy, though around him some students began nodding in agreement, with a few even shouting in support of her stance. "It is time," Alexis's voice rang out over the clamor, "for us to launch a new movement, a movement to restrict voting rights and the eligibility for public office solely to those under 50. They've had their chance and have ruined everything. Now it's our turn." At that moment, Professor Harrison, who was moderating the debate, stepped forward with a worried expression and asked, "Is there anyone who would like to present a counter-argument?" Alexis crossed her arms, a haughty smile playing on her lips, as the auditorium gradually fell silent, each student wondering if anyone dared to challenge her powerful onslaught. Immediately after Dr. Harrison repeated, "Is there anyone?" the atmosphere suddenly brimmed with anticipation as a deep, clear voice rang out through the tense silence. "Me." In that instant, the entire auditorium fell silent as every gaze converged on the speaker. The smirk on Alexis Bennett's face, having just delivered her incisive arguments, grew even more self-satisfied as Barron Trump unexpectedly stood up from his seat. Oh, she elongated her words into the microphone. Look who just decided to share his own opinion, the darling child of the Trump family. Stifled laughter rippled throughout the room, yet Barron Trump maintained his calm demeanor. With his tall stature and impeccably tailored suit, he advanced toward the podium like a composed leader amid a storm. Alexis made a grand, mocking gesture toward the microphone and taunted, "Go ahead, little Trump. Defend your boomer friends. Surely something interesting is about to unfold." Barron adjusted the microphone. Every movement was deliberate and unhurried, as if he were preparing a resolute response. The entire auditorium held its breath, many seemingly expecting him to falter under Alexis's infamous pressure tactics. Instead, Barron merely smiled, not a sarcastic smile, but one genuine and warm, imbued with deep empathy. "Thank you for your impassioned presentation, Alexis," he began in a steady, measured tone. "But passion without wisdom is like a rudderless ship, powerful, yet prone to losing its way." Alexis' smile quickly vanished, shocked by Barron's calm and cold logic. "You speak of progress," Barron continued, his voice warm yet commanding. "But true progress is not built by tearing down those who came before. It is built upon the solid foundation they established." He paused, letting his words seep into the charged space. "When you assert that those over 50 should not have a say in our future, do you realize that it is precisely those people who created the technology upon which you rely to construct your arguments?" Alexis attempted to interject, but Barron raised a hand gently, his tone remaining respectful. "Pardon me, but your turn has ended. I have listened to every word you said." Murmurs spread throughout the hall. No one had ever witnessed Alexis being so gracefully refuted. Barron's voice deepened further as he continued. "May I ask, what exactly is progress?" "You mentioned smartphones," he began, his eyes gleaming with a hint of amusement. "Are you aware that many groundbreaking innovations in your iPhone were developed by individuals in their 60s and 70s? The very boomers you wish to silence." Alexis shook her head and rolled her eyes, as if to dismiss, "That's just ancient history." "Speaking of history," Barron interjected softly, "remember your declaration that their America is dead." His voice, sharp yet courteous, resonated. "The America they built is the very foundation you use to attack them. The universities at which we study, constructed by them. The prosperity that allows us to debate instead of struggle for survival, created by them." The room fell into a thoughtful hush. Even Alexis's most fervent supporters could not help but remain silent, nodding along to each of Barron's words. "But they don't understand modern issues," Alexis suddenly exclaimed, her voice tinged with disappointment. "Really?" Barron arched an eyebrow, his eyes wryly amused as he looked at her. "Is it possible that a generation which experienced the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, numerous economic crises, and the dawn of the digital age still fails to grasp the complexities of our times?" she queried, her tone dripping with sarcasm. He paused, leaving a heavy silence. "They have resolved challenges that we haven't even imagined." Alexis's face flushed scarlet, yet she persisted. "But their values." "Values?" Barron repeated in a calm, incisive tone. "Are you referring to values like hard work, personal responsibility, and mutual respect? The very values that built the greatest nation on earth?" He gestured toward the room. "Look around. Everything in this room, from the chairs you sit on to the democratic system that allows us to debate, is created by those who clung to those values. A murmur of conversation spread as some students exchanged glances, while Alexis's supporters gradually fell silent. "But what truly concerns me," Barron continued, his eyes scanning every face in the room, "is that in the name of progress, you endorse a policy that appears to discriminate based on age." He tilted his head, his tone growing even sharper. "Isn't it ironic, declaring that you fight for inclusion while simultaneously calling for the exclusion of millions of American citizens?" Alexis Bennett's confidence gradually waned. She had not expected that Barron Trump's incisive arguments would cut through all her arrogance. "Let me simplify things," Barron Trump said, his voice brimming with confidence. "Consider those outdated people you're ignoring, for instance. Elon Musk, over 50. Bill Gates, over 60. Cancer researchers, most of them over 50. The professors who teach us, the majority over 50. And even my father at 78. He paused, each example striking the audience's minds like a sledgehammer. "So, should we dismiss all their contributions simply because of their age?" Alexis Bennett scoffed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, how touching. You're so self-satisfied, like a billionaire's kid, proudly flaunting your breakthroughs and hard work." She turned to the audience, gesturing dramatically, as if painting a vivid picture. "Can you see? He merely keeps bringing up those billionaires, those upper-class hoarders, while most ordinary Americans struggle with everyday life." Some students nodded enthusiastically, and Alexis seemed to regain a bit of her confidence. "And if we're talking about your father," she sneered, "tell me about the values you're so proud of, the values that divide families, dictate who can be loved and who cannot, and impose outdated religious beliefs on us." Barron interjected, his voice remaining calm. "Isn't it interesting? You claim to champion diversity, yet you have no qualms about mocking the faith of others." "Because their faith oppresses others," Alexis shouted, her voice rising as her emotions surged. "Traditional values are nothing but tools of control." She pointed directly at Barron, her eyes blazing with anger. "And you, just a rich kid born into wealth, protecting a system that keeps you at the top." The crowd erupted, with students cheering in support of Alexis's words. However, Barron's calm smile remained unshaken. "Let's re-examine that statement," his voice rang out, cutting through the clamor. "You claim those values are merely instruments of control, yet they have taught millions how to fight for civil rights, support their neighbors, and build communities." He tilted his head, his eyes sharp. "As for my trust fund, I've volunteered at veterans shelters since I was 14. He paused, locking his gaze onto Alexis's eyes. "And you? How many hours have you devoted to helping others?" The room suddenly fell silent. Alexis Bennett's face contorted, her voice faltering. "Isn't that what you meant?" Barron finished her words, continuing. "When the truth doesn't go your way, you resort to personal attacks, a classic tactic of someone who is losing." "Don't you dare!" Alexis' voice choked with anger. She lunged toward the podium, her platinum hair disheveled, her finger pointing directly at Barron. "This bastard doesn't deserve to be here." Those words echoed throughout the room, turning the atmosphere heavy with tension. At that moment, Professor Harrison hurriedly stepped forward, his eyes filled with concern. But Barron gently raised his hand. "It's all right, Professor," he said softly, his calm undiminished. Then he turned to Alexis with a smile full of empathy. "Do you know what's really interesting, Alexis? When the truth isn't on your side, you resort to yelling. When logic loses its grip, you turn to insults. And when reason fails, He paused, letting the oppressive atmosphere hang in the air. "You've shown everyone your true self." Alexis Bennett's face turned bright red, every emotion laid bare in that moment. "I'm showing everyone the truth about people like you," she shouted. "No!" Barron's voice, firm yet gentle, rang out. "You're showing everyone the consequences of hiding hatred behind the guise of progress. You claim to fight discrimination, yet you are truly discriminatory. You preach tolerance, yet you show not an ounce of it. You demand respect, while you disrespect millions of Americans. The very people who built this nation." The entire auditorium fell into silence, every eye fixed on Barron Trump as he concluded. "But let me tell you what I see here. I see a person who has been consumed by their own ideology to the point of forgetting one fundamental truth: that every generation stands on the shoulders of those who came before." Alexis Bennett's confidence gradually faded as the dialogue grew so incisive and real that it left her disheartened. Alexis tried to interject, her voice trembling. "You're twisting my words." Barron Trump, with a cold yet equally refined demeanor, replied, "I'm merely quoting verbatim what you said. You called the previous generation dinosaurs, mocked their faith, and derided the sacrifices they made. Why?" Barron tilted his head, his eyes filled with stern resolve. "Is it because they don't share your vision?" He shook his head in denial. "That is not progress. That is nothing but prejudice." With a voice that resonated throughout the auditorium, Barron turned to the audience. "You have all just witnessed something extraordinary. A person who claims to fight for diversity, yet attacks diversity of thought, demands inclusion while simultaneously calling for the exclusion of millions, and preaches tolerance while showing absolutely no tolerance for differing beliefs." In that moment, Alexis Bennett's face turned ashen, while her supporters shifted uneasily in their seats. "But this is the most ironic of all," Barron said, his tone gentle yet full of caring. "While you stand here demanding that we discard the values of the previous generation, you are the one benefiting from their legacy, the very foundation you use to criticize them, the freedom you exploit, and the education we receive." He paused, each word echoing through the stifling atmosphere of the hall. "So, tell me, Alexis." Barron shifted his tone to one as gentle as it was soothing. "In your vision of progress, is there room for dissenting opinions? Or is diversity only acceptable when it conforms exactly to the story you want to tell?" For the first time since the debate began, Alexis Bennett's words fell silent, as if she had lost all the strength to respond. Barron continued, his voice both commanding and filled with empathy. "You are repeating the oldest mistake in history, believing that wisdom belongs only to one group." In that moment, the once radiant and sharp Alexis Bennett gradually lost her luster. She gripped the podium tightly, her knuckles whitening as emotions surged. "See," Barron went on, "true progress is not about silencing the voices of others, but about learning from them. Every generation assumes it knows more than the previous one, only to eventually realize there is so much more to learn." The room fell utterly silent. The students who had previously cheered Alexis's harsh words now sat motionless, lost in contemplation. "Those boomers you once derided," Barron said in a soft tone that carried the weight of truth, "were once young idealists too. They fought for civil rights, dared to question authority, demanded change, and they learned that lasting progress comes from building bridges, not burning down the past." Alexis Bennett's shoulders trembled, and the fire in her eyes slowly diminished, replaced by the first glimmer of understanding. "That is why," Barron said, his voice both gentle and firm, "instead of trying to silence those with experience, why not try to listen to them? You might be surprised by how much they understand about the shifts of our times, for they have endured far more challenges than we have. With dignified calm, Barron gradually stepped away from the podium and returned to his seat, leaving Alexis Bennett standing alone, burdened by the weight of his words. After Barron's powerful speech, Alexis quietly returned to her seat. The debate continued, but the atmosphere in the room had clearly changed. The students who spoke afterward did so with more caution and thoughtfulness in every word they uttered. Nearly an hour later, as Dr. Harrison prepared to close the debate session, a timid hand was raised. "Yes, Ms. Bennett?" the professor asked, his voice hesitant, as he wasn't sure if he should reopen the earlier dialogue. I may speak one more time?" Her voice was so soft it was almost inaudible, completely the opposite of the confidence she once exuded. Several students exchanged worried glances. Dr. Harrison hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Keep it brief." Alexis Bennett stepped up to the podium with unsteady steps. The young woman who had once proudly commanded the stage now appeared transformed, a person who had undergone a profound change. "I need to say something," her voice trembled. "Today, I stand here, filled with arrogance, having attacked the very foundations of our society and disrespected millions of Americans, the very people who created everything we have. I was wrong." Alexis Bennett took a trembling breath, her face revealing deep remorse. "I never imagined that Barron Trump would be the one to teach me about true compassion and genuine empathy," she said, her voice quivering. "That someone I once so readily despised could teach me about inclusion and real kindness? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to everyone I have offended, to the generations I have disrespected. I was blind, and today my eyes have been opened." Without waiting for any response, she quickly stepped away from the podium and silently left the auditorium. That evening, as students began to leave the building, Alexis unexpectedly saw Barron Trump gathering his belongings. Her heart pounded, and with hesitation she approached him, filled with fear that he would respond with the disdain she had once shown him. "Barron?" Her voice was small, tentative. May I talk to you for a moment?" He turned around, and to her surprise, his face showed no trace of anger or resentment. Instead, Barron smiled warmly. "Of course." Alexis swallowed hard, trying to find the right words, then said, I truly apologize for every word I uttered, for the way I behaved." Barron paused quietly in thought before replying. "Do you know what's really interesting about our age?" He spoke gently, his voice full of sincerity. "We are old enough to hold strong convictions, yet still young enough to sometimes be blinded by those convictions. Being swept away by fervent ideologies is entirely normal. And that is precisely why the wisdom of previous generations is so valuable. They once stood exactly where we are standing now." Alexis looked at him, her eyes sparkling with surprise at Barron's compassion. "How can you be so wise?" she asked. Barron smiled in response. "I have had excellent teachers, those who taught me that true strength does not lie in winning debates, but in building understanding. Previous generations have fought battles just like we do, held fervent beliefs, and learned invaluable lessons. We don't have to agree with everyone, but we must respect their journey." Moved by Barron's kindness, Alexis suddenly stepped forward and embraced him. In that moment, Barron appeared momentarily surprised, but then he returned the hug with gentle understanding. When they parted, both understood that this was not merely a victory or defeat in a debate. It was a moment when wisdom triumphed over pride, and understanding overcame division. If this story has touched your heart, We'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Don't forget to share your thoughts about this story and let us know which city you're watching from. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.